Welcome to From Stuck to Scale, Growth Strategies for Small and Mid-Sized Businesses, your guide to navigating growth, transformation, and success in today's ever-changing business landscape. Each week, we'll dive into proven strategies, real-world case studies, and actionable insights designed to help small and mid-sized business owners scale smart, lead stronger, and grow faster. Let's get you unstuck and on the path to sustainable, scalable success. Now your host, Julio Gonzalez.
Welcome back to From Stuck to Scaled, Growth Strategies for Small and Mid-Sized Businesses. I'm your host, Julio Gonzalez, and every week we explore practical strategies, leadership insights, and real-world tools to help small and mid-sized businesses break through barriers and grow with confidence. Have you ever had one of your best employees leave? I'll bet it was for money. At least you think it is. Today we're talking about how employees leave managers, not companies. And it's usually not about the money. Today's guest is going to help us understand this dynamic and what to do about it. Joining us today is Diana Valenuela Hidalgo, a powerhouse HR strategist and founder of DVHR Solutions, known for helping companies turn people into profit. Diana is an HR leader with over 20 years of experience helping multicultural organizations align people strategy with business growth. As founder of DVHR Solutions, she partners with companies to improve performance, retention, and culture through strategic HR consulting. Diana has led HR for Fortune 500 companies across industries like logistics, retail, and media. She holds a master's in HR management, a PHR certification, and is McKinsey Leadership Accelerator graduate. Her mission: to turn people into a company's most profitable asset. And joining us now is Diana Valenuela. So, Diana, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Julio. I'm so thrilled to be here.
Tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
All right. Well, again, my name is Diana Valenuela. I worked 25 years in human resources. I worked for Fortune 500 companies, and I'm very passionate about HR. About 3.5 years ago, I started my own consulting company because I realized that we can impact small businesses. So I focus now on helping small and medium businesses grow with the HR strategy. And my focus is connecting people with profit because we know a business without a profit is not a business.
Yeah, absolutely. And you and I met at a networking event that we go to, and we've had some pretty in-depth conversations because our businesses are very closely aligned. And I love the topic that you proposed because I am very much a believer that most of the time employees don't leave for money, but they leave because of the manager. So talk to us and the company, obviously. So talk to a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, it was great meeting you, and I'm very honored to be here with you, Julio. But from my 20-something years of experience working at Fortune 500 companies, I started seeing different reasons why employees leave organizations. But there was a pattern, right? And the pattern was pretty much leadership and toxic work environments, right? When I did the exit interviews in those companies, employees felt overlooked, undervalued, and underchallenged, and often unsupported by their leader. So it's not surprise that at that point when you're exiting an employee and they're leaving, it's already too late to ask those questions.
Right.
The idea is to be proactive and have a different strategy to be able to prevent that happening. But in today's market, we know that the ability to keep top talent, it is a competitive advantage to any business, right?
So what should companies do, before you get to that point? Because obviously that starts, long time ago. So
Yeah.
how do we address that?
Yeah, before I get into that, I'm going to give you other reasons too, because oftentimes we hear that employees leave organizations because of compensation. And that could be a reason, but there are other hidden forces within the reason of why employees leave organizations. And we know that's very impactful to the bottom line. Lack of career growth is another one, right? So We know that top performers, they really crave development. And we're not only talking about linear career growth, but horizontal too,
Right.
because they're looking for experiences, they're looking to really learn new skills. So to be able to create a individualized career path, I think it's going to be key to retain top employees. We talked about the main one that I've seen across the board, which is the poor leadership and toxic work environment. And that speaks to lack of transparency, lack of communication, and lack of empathy, right? Nowadays, we see a lot of leaders that are very, what I call transactional, where they're not building and connecting. They're
Right.
just basically going through the motion of getting the job done and not really understanding the perspective of the employee and not able to create a connection between a personal aspiration with the company's goals. And that is the secret sauce for success and retention. Yeah.
And when you say connection, go into that a little bit more because
Yeah.
I'm thinking connection at a number of different levels.
Yeah. So we're humans and we like to connect. And I always say connect with your people on a personal level first. Understand who they are as individuals, right? Understand their family, what they do outside, out of work, because we'll bring ourselves to work. So connecting is really getting to know your employees, their strengths, their opportunities, what they're struggling with. So you understand the context behind why an employee may come late one day, right? Because maybe they're having an issue with daycare or they're going through divorce and they're going through a battle at home, right? So when you build that connection, you can not only understand what's the context behind, but you can go deeper into coaching because you already built that relationship with the employee. And another reason why employees leave organizations is because of burned out and work-life imbalance. So unsustainable paces, intense workload pressures. We need to be able to catch that earlier, not late, because we know that there's context outside of work, right? And if your employee is late or is coming late, you now know and understand why that's happening. So we need to be able to be aware of that and catch it early, not only at the exit interview process.
Diana, I hear a lot about the lack of loyalty from employers, but that loyalty is everything that you've just described. Uh,
Hmm.
it used to be that you would get a job and you were in that job for 30, 40 years and retire, and you were there your whole life and you came out with a pension.
Hmm.
Um, how how can companies not go back to that, because I don't know that we're ever going to go back to companies giving pensions in that way, but how can we care for that whole individual in a way that is still financially viable to the organization, basically addressing the things that you've just listed?
That's a great question, Julio. And I think we need to understand generations and the generations that are coming to the workforce, right? I'm a Gen X, very different from baby boomers. We had the Gen Zs, and pretty soon in 2028, we're going to have Generation Alpha.
Hmm.
Generation Alpha are the kids of the millenniums, right? And they're gonna want something completely different in terms of benefits. They might not even care about benefits because they are hyper digital. And when it comes to training and development, they just don't want to be in a classroom with everyone else
Right.
learning a cookie cutter approach about a specific topic. So I think we need to personalize benefits too. And it sounds like, oh my God, how do we do that? There's a way to do that. And understanding that based on the generation, there's different needs and wants, and our workforce is full of all four, five to be generations, and everybody wants something different. So, how do we level set that in understanding what the communication style is, understanding the needs and wants, and coming up with something that is going to really benefit all generations, right? But providing that customization of training and development, because that's going to be key for the new generation coming to the workforce.
Yeah, I had an episode, a couple of, I think it was episode number two, with
Mm-hmm.
Alexis Bolaños, who is part of my Leadership Hollywood
Mm-hmm.
group, and it was precisely leadership and Gen X or Gen and the millennials, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So we talked about the differences between Gen Xers and her generation, and they're looking for a lot more independence, but not necessarily from a management perspective, but
Mm-hmm.
from how they do their job.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I think we saw during COVID.
Yes.
Because now you have people at home, and the existing managers didn't know how to handle that because we've
Mm-hmm.
never really trained for that. So there's this whole series of things coming together,
Mm-hmm.
um, that we're now blaming, oh, the millennials don't know how to work. Well, is it that they don't know how to work, or is it that we, the Gen Xers and others, don't know how to manage? So
Right.
how do you approach that with your customers?
Well, you brought me back to this one scenario with one of my clients where he was reluctant to allow an employee to work from home because he thought they were not going to be doing anything and he needed to be in the office. The employee needed to be in the office near him. He needed to see him every day. And I think it's perception. And that, to be honest with you, that's an old school mentality because
Completely.
at the end of the day, we manage by results. And it is the manager's responsibility to put KPIs, metrics, to have one-on-ones. And I created an acronym for those one-on-ones. I call them IFMs, individual focus meetings,
Okay, I like that.
because, yeah, because the one-on-ones can be sometimes transactional. Like, okay, tell me what you're working on, and when I have an individual focus meeting, I'm going to be focusing on your growth. Yes, I'm going to go through did you do it, yes or no, and why? But we're going to have career conversations. In that one sheet of one on one, I'm going to have your goals for the year. I already know your style. I already know the things you like and the way you want me to communicate with you. So that's going to give me a lot of context on the conversation. And even if it's a conversation that is based on performance, I'm going to have that data to be able to be intentional. And I'm going to build that trust. So I think we need to evolve and understand that we're losing a lot of people, especially now that some of the companies decided to bring people on site. I do understand that on-site brings that synergy, that there are times where like
Completely.
sales teams, for instance, I love when the sales teams come together and they have the huddles and that energy, that's amazing. But asking yourself as an employer, where do I build that flexibility? If it's not because you're a salesperson and you need to be here at 3, can I give you one day? Can we negotiate something? Understanding the context behind that person. And we went back to the beginning, connecting and understanding what that human needs is going to help you retain, and you'll see that they will give you 150% because you're creating a win-win between what the employee wants and what the business needs to achieve its goals.
What was your acronym again for the one-on-ones?
IFMs.
IFM. So in the IFMs, do you coach your leadership clients to the IFM being a two-way conversation?
Yes, exactly. A
Yeah,
two-way conversation, and having that guide would help really to be, but you can only go to that process when you build that really good relationship and connection, because if you
completely.
really never talk to an and you can't come up with the excuse that it's because my employee is not on site, you still can connect, you still can be intentional. All right. Because once you do that, you have the IFM, and it's really just about that person. It's really about their growth, their hurdles, their obstacles. And your job is to remove them and to give that feedback right there in that moment, that candid feedback, and asking for permission to grow them. Right. I always tell my leaders, always drive the intention of the meeting at the beginning of the conversation. Is this meeting about giving you some constructive feedback? Is this meeting just to talk about a particular project? Is this meeting is to talk about your career aspirations? And you should always, you can even intertwine some of those things together. Like I always talk about career aspirations and what's going on in their life because that impacts performance. So I always want to know how you're doing, how's your family, how's everything going on your side, because that would help me also understand if there are any red flags or something that as a leader I need to tackle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
And the leader, there's so many bad, in big quotes, right?
Hmm.
Leaders. They're
Yes,
not. They're just managers.
managers, right?
Um, I had one that I would, we had weekly one-on-ones, and I literally had about 3.5 minutes of his attention.
Mhm.
After that, he would start yawning and like, trying to control the yawn, so you can tell that he was just, uncomfortable. And say, okay, lost him, and at that point, I'd find a way to just, cut the conversation.
Yeah.
The leader has to be astute enough and have
Mhm.
the EQ, to really,
Yes.
be active in that conversation, in listening to that employee. It cannot just be, a one-way conversation. And I want to make sure that our listeners, hear that,
Mhm.
because so many think that, a one-on-one is, give me your status and I'm going to tell you that you're doing a good or a bad job. That's not enough. You have to connect,
Yes.
in both directions, with that employee.
And part of that, Julio, I think as we've seen with some of the organizations, we are missing the mark when it comes to training and development leaders because they are the reason for employee engagement. And there was that old saying, people don't leave organizations, they leave their leaders.
Yep.
So we spent millions of dollars on, and because you were in IT, right, training leaders and the
Hmm.
technical part of the
Right.
job, and but how about those soft skills of really connecting, of building relationships with your direct reports, of managing conflict, of managing emotional, right, outbursts, or things that happen on a day to day when your employee is upset, frustrated, and he's having one of those moments. How do you manage that, right? We need to build for those competencies and for that model. So it's easier for the leaders to have these conversations because it's not always obvious and depends on the leader's personality. It could be hard for someone to really connect at that level.
Yep. Absolutely. And, you know, in my experience, companies have stopped doing training almost altogether.
Hmm.
And they'll do, I'll call it spot training,
Hmm.
where they see finally that there's a problem, and we're going to go through this special 6-month effort, and they might bring some trainers in and do some training, and then it's done. And training has to be an ongoing
Hmm.
initiative, and it doesn't have to be complex, but you have to have something in place, to continue that growth and learning for everyone at every level.
Correct. The continuous training, very intentional. I always think that one of the things that we need to do better as organizations is to allow for the execution and implementation of the training. We did a study in my previous company, and we spent thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars on training, and we didn't see the return on investment. Why? Right? So it was like sending someone 5 days to take this training, and they came back, and 2 days later, nothing changed. Right? So it is a responsibility to build that implementation, whether it's a project, how do we, and immediately, because we know that there's a time when you kind of lose that momentum and the learning is gone. So I think that is also one of the major responsibilities of a leader, especially if we're sending someone to be trained. What's the value of that in the return on investment? What is he or she able to bring back that we can implement in our department so we can get this process better, this whatever it is the training about, but allowing that to happen in real time is going to be incredibly important.
Now you're bridging, training into one of my favorite areas, and that's change management.
Mm.
I'm a certified, I forget what the acronym is, certified change management practitioner.
Wow.
Um, and change management is hard,
Very hard.
and to your point on the training, yes, you send somebody off, for a week, or you bring in people, whatever, method you want to follow, but then it transitions into a change management exercise. So how do you manage that ongoing evolution, that was brought in through that training?
Hmm.
And companies don't understand change management at all. Tomorrow we're going to start, instead of ABC, we're going to do one, two, three, poof, and magically it's supposed to, happen and stick. But most companies don't
Hmm.
go into, a change management effort to make
Hmm.
sure that everyone buys in and that everyone understands, and can really instill substantive change. So talk to me a little bit about that post training, implementation and adherence,
Yeah.
utilizing change management.
That's a great point, Julio. And I think part of that is we've seen a lot of organizations who have a lot of that compliance training, and it's very transactional. We are
Yes.
going through a compliance and almost like check the box. We need to go to D&I training. Everybody needs to be trained on that. Yeah, it is compliance. We got to do it, but we got to get out of that mandatory training, right? I think we need to get excited about the opportunity for learning, and it needs to start on the top. Our top leaders need to really convey that message and deliver that message. It's not only the leader, but it comes from the top. When the leader can share, right, their views and beliefs and training and how, a success story that helped them not only acquire maybe a new job, but acquire new skills, able to have ammunition or evidence of, of things that they want to learn. I think if we have that coming from the top, is really going to set the tone for a continuous learning process. And then when you get to that leader departmental area, you want to make sure that as soon as the employee comes back from that training, you have that one-on-one. And that one-on-one is going to be all about that training, all about the 5, 3, or 2 days that you spent. Walk me through the lessons, walk me through some of the things and comparing and contrasting, right? Let's say you go for a training on change management or whatever it is, right? You coming back with specific ideas of what can we do different, and from there convert it into a project. So sometimes leaders are afraid of doing that because it's like, my employee is already overwhelmed. Now he's coming from a training and I'm going to give him more work. Well, guess what? It is your job to be creative and think about, before he comes back from that training, what in his day to day I can really align that training to, so we can create a win win for the business and for the employee. You're able to use the skills and what you learn in that training, and we're able to really obtain maybe creativity, innovation, or a new process altogether that is going to help us do X, Y, and Z. But you have to be very intentional, and you have to create something that is really going to move the needle, not just to create another project. It's not like a pilot, it's a real project that you can really connect, so you can create that win-win between what was learned and what the business needs, so you can reinforce that and then you congratulate, right? So it's not only you went through the training, you implemented, but you recognize the efforts. And now guess what, everybody's adopting a new methodology, a new system, a new way of thinking, just because that person, came back with a fresh perspective of implementing something new that we're able to execute real time.
And let's elevate that conversation a little bit higher and bring that to the broader corporate culture.
Mm.
Now, how does corporate culture fit into this evolution almost of the organization?
That's a great question, Julio. I think depends of the organization, and every single organization is going through a different phase, right? Some organizations are growing very rapidly. Other organizations might be restructuring, so they're not really thinking about growth and development because they're restructuring. They might not be thinking about, I'm going to send my employee to for training, because that's not what they're focused. So we need to first understand what state is the organization going through, because if an organization is cutting and is reducing, the training might not be the most important thing at this moment, right? Our efforts might be concentrated on really taking care of our employees and providing the severance and right? But if an organization is expanding and is growing, and they want to keep their employees, we want to ensure that our corporate leaders and corporate culture, supports that. And the first thing is the budget for training, because we know that the first thing that goes out the window is the financials, right? When there's cuts and business is not doing well one particular month or two or three a quarter, the first thing that sometimes come to the table are, what do we cut? What do we cut? And training and development goes out the window, right? Oh, that's the easiest thing to cut. We were budgeted. Never forget conversation that I had with a direct report, and we had allotted for, I think it was $1,000 or $2,000 on a yearly basis, so they can go in and get certified in HR. And for them, that was huge because it's outside of what we do, but you have this budget for you, so you can go in and get trained and whatever you want to do, and that it ties back to the business. And unfortunately, that was cut, completely cut. Julio, I took it out of myself to send the employee, and I paid that out of my own pocket. Of course, I try to get that reimbursed, and that didn't
Right.
happen, and that was fine because I had promised her that she was going to go through that training, and here I am talking to her about, oh yeah, sorry, cancel that, cancel your dream to be certified because we had a backwater. So I think really prioritize learning and really not eliminating that, even if we have a bad period. Unfortunately, I've seen that happening many, many times.
And it's part of the business cycle to have better periods and worse periods, but a lot of times the company will cut off training like you're saying and not provide any kind of future for that.
Mhm.
So I think it's very important
Mhm.
to effectively communicate with the staff and say, look, we're having a rough time right now, and
Mhm.
we're going to have to postpone
Mhm.
training. But as soon as we're able to bring that back on, we're going to do that.
Mhm.
Giving the employees some hope
Right.
that we're not just forgetting about this altogether, we're just putting it aside for a bit. That even that little extra, I think, goes a long way to reassure the employee
Yeah.
that the company's still looking out for them.
And there's so many different options of things that you could do. If you're gonna have that message, I think you want to be intentional and have different options. I mean, I created mentoring programs. I work for a company who had different offices in different parts of the US. So we have mentoring processes, programs across different cities. We created a data live in another department, right? That is all part of training. And that was a great program because I'm in HR. I really want to learn finance. So I was partnered with a chief financial officer to be with him for a day to experience a data live of his day. And I learned a lot. So that's another type of training that, yeah, it's not going to be a formal classroom training, but it's going to give you new skills and new understanding for a completely different department. And that's all skills that an employee is gaining. That's also part of training. So I think there's a lot of things, if that were to happen, we just have to be creative, intentional, and come up with organically something that we can do as an organization that will still be considered training, that is going to help employees acquire different skills.
And that's a fantastic point because not all training is classroom training.
Mhm.
That you can absolutely have an employee step into another role, at least from a shadowing perspective,
Yes.
to learn other aspects of the business. I've had employees that were developers and they wanted to eventually move into the business and go spend a week with whatever operations department,
Yes.
and maybe it's not a week, maybe it's a couple of hours a week, on an ongoing basis. But that's thinking creatively about
Mhm.
what you can do for the employees. And a lot of companies don't